So as we've talked through this discussion on artists versus designers, or artistic modes of thinking versus design modes of thinking, and we've talked through all the differences, I think we need to take some time and talk through what do they share? Because I think some of the things that they share are often misunderstood and cause misunderstanding, but I also think that they hold a key to helping each other open new opportunities and avenues. Here's what I mean. Artists and designers in their modes of thinking share at least four things that I can tell you. The first one is they share creativity and imagination. Now, I know that there is an ongoing debate. Are the designers more creative or are the artists more creative? And the artists will say, well, we have an unlimited field and we can do whatever we want. The canvas is huge. Yeah, so we're obviously more creative and more imaginative. Maybe. And the designers say, but we have greater constraints. And because we have greater constraints, we have to think more creatively inside the space that we're given. So we're more creative. Maybe. I think artists and designers share imagination and creativity because they have the capacity to see things that are not and make them so. They can see solutions. They can see expressions. They can see things out there that other people can't see. And that's the beauty of being a creative, because I think artists and designers, in both of their ways of thinking, are creatives. The creative sees and expresses and solves out of their soul. That imagination, that creativity is drawn out of who they were made to be. And here's the truth. I honestly think all people are creative because I think that they were made in the image of God. Because they were made in the image of God, they have the capacity to create because God is creative. So when I say that everyone's creative, that doesn't mean they're all creative in the same ways, but they do share creativity and imagination. And that imagination, though it sometimes causes competition because they think, well, we're more creative or we're more creative. Well, we created this solution and you created this expression. Which is better? I don't think you're getting to the point. The point is that part of what makes us human is our capacity to imagine and create. And we need to embrace that, especially in a time where everything in the world around us is trying to push us to consume more. We need to push back by being great artists and great designers, great creatives who create new things to share with the world. Because the world is constantly trying to say, consume. But that will destroy your soul if you keep consuming all the time. The only things that consume are things like black holes. That's not who I want to be, and I don't think that's who you want to be either. We were made to create. So we share that in common. We also share a couple of other things. One, as a person who's been teaching visual design, currently teaching that, I'm fascinated as I study visual design how much the aesthetic principles of what I would have considered design actually apply to artists. And so I've learned a lot about how artists have been using aesthetic principles. And that's easy when you're looking at somebody, say, like Da Vinci. But realistically, it's not as easy when you're looking at some of the other artists because you think, well, they just got up there and they just started slapping paint on. That's not actually what happened. They share aesthetic principles. Sometimes as loose as just thinking about balance and focal points. Sometimes as deep as thinking about color theory. Other times even being much more specific and thinking about things like the golden ratio or the rule of thirds or other ways of framing different ways of expressing yourself as an artist, which typically sound like, well, you're just doing ratios. That's probably a designer. That's a grid. Maybe, but the artists are also thinking that way too. They actually do share aesthetic principles. And so I'm encouraging you on both sides, artists and designers thinking needs to be challenged by aesthetic principles to begin to think through, why am I using these or why am I breaking them? Because an artist and designer both knows that there are rules and that the rules are sometimes meant to be broken. The third thing I think they share is skill. It's a kind of craft. I watched this happen with an artist and a designer that were sitting in a room and they were beginning to work on a project and they said, well, I'm going to start sketching out some solutions. And the artist said, well, that's funny because I always sketch out my paintings and my expressions before I get started. That's my first step. And they said, oh, really? So drawing is one of the skills that we both share. Well, we must be getting toward the same thing. And I had to stop them and say, wait a second, you're going to get to an expression which has nothing to do with a solution. And you're going to get to a solution which has nothing to do with an expression. But you did both start with a skill, with a craft. And that skill and craft that you share means that you have language to talk to one another when you're working together, if you have to work together, to start in the conversation in terms of skill and craft. Drawing is a fantastic place for both to start, because I constantly encourage young designers to learn to draw so that they can quickly move through their ideas so they can get to solutions. And I think it's a fantastic space for artists to begin to draw just so that they can begin exploring a little bit using that skill. The final one is tools. So if I just took that example, I could say, well, both of them use pencils and paper or sketchbooks, but my daughter thinks like an artist. And yet she's constantly using technology. She's using apps and pencils and different programs, everything from drawing and sketching to concepting to final expressions. As an artist, she's using the same tools that my designer friends use to create ad campaigns and logos. They use the same tools. And so sometimes they say, well, I use Photoshop or I use Illustrator, or I use this or that program. Yeah, that's great. Guess what? You're using the same tools, which means you have another point of contact in which you can help each other learn new components of those tools to foster more opportunities for exploration and further opportunities to solve the problem. All four of these things actually bind creatives together and I think offer an opportunity to break through creative struggle. Well, what do you mean? Because you share imagination, because you share aesthetic principles, because you share crafts and skills as well as tools, when you get stuck, which, by the way, most creatives do, so it's fine if it happens. When you get stuck, what if the next time you're an artist and you're stuck in the exploration process, you stop for a moment, and in that exploration, you thought, what if I tried to go at this problem for a period of exploration as a designer? What do I mean? You say, I'm trying to express this idea and I'm stuck. So if I had to make a flyer or a postcard out of this thing, what would that look like? Why? Here's what I always say. The greatest struggle seems to be for the artist, or one of the scariest things for an artist, is an unlimited canvas. Think of a canvas the size of a universe. If you're an artist, this sounds at one point amazing and also terrifying. Why? Because where do you put the first dot? So, what would a designer do if they had to face an unlimited canvas? They just say, define the problem. Put a frame on it. So now I know what I have to play with. The frame, solve the problem inside the frame. So as you're exploring, what if instead you thought, what if I take this designer process and apply it as an artist as part of my exploration? And here's the key. If it works and it helps you and it gives you one little nugget, great, go with it. If nothing happens and it doesn't work, you can throw it away as part of your exploration. You're still in charge, you're still the master, and you're still controlling the outcome. Flip to the other side. You're a designer. You're trying to come up with a solution. What is the designer's greatest problem? Generally, constraint. They've been told, we discovered the problem. The problem looks like this little tiny circle, and I'm stuck. I've been trying to come up with solutions and going round and round, and it's just not working. Something's not connecting. What do I do? Stop. What if in your development cycle, or even in your defining cycle, if you're not there yet, you actually said, I'm going to just take a moment and think like an artist and think completely different and say, what if I could have all unlimited space, more freedom than the constraints of the problem, just as part of coming up with a good solution means that you have to explore several different kinds of solutions. You saw this as a chance to explore an opportunity in an artistic way that frees you up from some of the constraints that you face. The artist is wrestling with freedom, and the designer is wrestling with constraints. If they switch, whenever they're stuck, they will automatically have to think differently, and they may find pathways and opportunities to solve whatever it is that's in front of them, to get past that obstacle of expression, or to help them solve the problem in a clearer and more expressive way that still meets the needs of the people, solves the problem, and delights the audience. If you think that you're stuck, I'm simply suggesting that you take some time and think like the other person to see, does that clear it up for me? And it may or may not. But oftentimes what I found fascinating is that when I have a designer who's stuck and I say, listen, here's all I need you to do. I need you to stop and go take a day and go sit in an art museum. And they say, but I'm not an artist. I'm a designer. Right. I just need new ideas. I need new freedom to come into the space that you've maybe made too tiny. And they do it and they come back and they feel refreshed. And that concept I talked about before where the cup is filled, even the designers have cups where they need creativity and imagination because they share it to come back into that space. So how are they finding ways to fill that up? And that may not be the same for the artist. But what I found is when I force them to think about the opposite way of thinking, it tends to open new opportunities, not shut them down. If you're an artist struggling, try design thinking. If you're a designer struggling, try to think like an artist for a little while. You'll be amazed at the new and exciting opportunities that pop into your head that you just couldn't get to by thinking the way you've been thinking all along.